in a sense, wind is really like high volume, low frequency sound, um, pressure waves. Um, so yeah, I recorded up at the top of the hill, and in the audible range, the wind wasn't too bad. So I thought it would be okay. But then I played it back, and everything was distorted by like this really loud, low sound. Um, I was actually peaking, so like my sound wasn't even there over the pressure of the wind. So I will stick to these little cozy, like really sheltered, mossy nooks in future. Just fine by me. I've skipped a number because I'm talking about games now because I've got games in mind. So, like, I want to keep the like even odd. It's just like if someone's only interested in the game stuff, then they can just look at every even numbered one. But yeah, it's yeah. Like I like from the script, like do 100 things. Like I've done that one. I record it. So I might talk on that topic again or not, but who cares? Like so magic wand zap. Single Pouch has a teleport wand effect. It's one of the first ones I put in the game because it's very simple. Just move to a random coordinate, and yeah, what I found early on was that it just felt bad if an enemy was teleported into the course of the ray that you're currently firing. So the ray would go do 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 do, hit an enemy, teleport it here, keep trundling along and hit it again and teleport it somewhere else. It could take a lot of time to resolve. Often it was to your advantage because it was like if it was the one that does damage, it does damage and then teleports it and does damage again. But it felt disproportionate, like you hadn't earned all that damage. Like it's cool to like if you can set up like if a game had like triggered a trap effect, if you could set up a sequence of casts that would teleport a creature into another trap, which was teleported into another trap, which was teleported into another trap, and do damage every time, that would feel cool. That would be proportional to the effort you'd spent setting it up. Whereas if you just zap once and something happens several times to the same creature, that feels kind of wrong. There are moments in Single Pouch where a disproportionate effect is appropriate. Like there's the terremoto earthquake effect that damages the whole screen. And it's good to have rare moments like that, and like the reflexal when one goes around corners to potentially fill up the entire map. And in that case, it can potentially hit the same enemy twice, once horizontally, once vertically. That's cool because it's like rare and requires a specific setup, and if you pull it off, it feels good. If you pull it off intentionally, it feels great. If it just happens randomly, like it's fine. Like it makes sense that happens. So yeah, simple thing to do. I just made the teleport transport enemies outside of where the beam is heading, and like it's an easy one. No, nobody's going to play it and notice that it's not a fully random teleport. It's a teleport conditional on where the beam's not heading, because like it just makes sense. It just feels you never stop and consider it. You never be like, oh, is this a purely random teleport? Like it just like it hits it, goes somewhere random. Like you don't think about it. It's just what makes sense as the right behaviour. But then, yeah, I added in the reckless owl that makes the beam go around corners and potentially fill up the entire map, and that screws that up because then there's no space for it to go. And that's okay. Like if you have the beam go around the entire map, it's disproportional already, and cool, an enemy gets hit a couple of times. I think I made it prefer to go where the beam's already gone. That doesn't like because the beam is drawn continuously everywhere it goes until it reaches the end. It doesn't feel great for it to teleport there because it kind of like feels like an occupied space because it's occupied by the beam. But it works. It's a rare enough thing to come up that when it happens you just like go with it. So that's fine. I think that's acceptable. It's enough of a boon that you don't have the same enemy getting hit by the same wand many times in a row, that it's worth that occasional weird situation. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Then, however, okay, there's a wand effect that terminates the ray when it hits an enemy. That's fine. If it hits and teleports an enemy, like that makes sense. It's stopping there, and the enemy goes somewhere else. That's fine. Then there's as you complete multiple runs in sequential, the enemies gradually get upgrades, and one of the upgrades they can get is that this enemy stops your wand. So it's like the same as the beam effect, but like on the enemy. So yeah, maybe the wand's going along, teleports this enemy over here, hits this enemy stops the wand. That's okay. But the function that I had to predict where the ray is going to go, so that it can pick a spot to teleport to that isn't in the upcoming spaces, needs to know about that. So that got gradually more complicated. Yeah, at first it was just like, don't put it in the same column or row up to a wall, but then it can pass through walls, so then it has to actually predict the bit, then it can go around corners, and then it can stop something. It would feel bad, like you wouldn't notice if it went to the completion of that potential beam and happened to not teleport you into those spaces, but it would feel wrong to me. Like, I want it to be I want it to be a consistent rule, even if most players aren't going to think about what the rule is. So yeah, the like prediction of where the beam is going to go needs to take into account these various effects that cause the beam to prematurely stop, so that the tiles past that are valid spaces to teleport to. Because that could matter. Like, if there's a beam that would, if not stopped, cover the entire map, then you have that situation I mentioned where it will teleport into the earlier part of the beam that's already been computed, been animated, And yeah, so you would notice the conflict at that point, because there would be spaces it could have teleported to instead, but it teleports into the beam, and you're like, I've never seen it teleport into the beam before. Is that allowed? Like, what happened? So that's not a problem, I thought. Then there's the polymorph ability, which changes the type of an enemy to a random other type, potentially one that can stop the beam. And this is a problem. So I have to predict not just where the ray is going to go and what corners it's going to go around and what enemies it's going to. I have to predict what, not just look at the type of enemy they are now, but predict what they're going to be transformed into. So I have to pre-compute those random rolls, which is fine. But it starts to get complicated. Yeah, so how it is now, and how it has been for years, and like hardly anyone's noticed, and so it's probably actually fine. It has been discussed on the Discord, but everyone was fine with how it's currently handled, even if it's maybe not perfect. Is that the type of enemy it is at the moment when the ray hits it is what determines whether the ray stops there. And like in a way that means there's no nasty surprises, because if you're trying to hit this enemy and this one's in the way and you shoot up, you're expecting to pass through both, like it's annoying if this one then flips into something that can block the ray. That would be a nasty surprise. But nasty surprises are kind of a big part of what the game's about, so it would be okay to have a nasty surprise. And then if you don't know that that's the rule, then you do have a nasty surprise. Like if you see, yeah, it's cold. I don't know if you can see, but I can see on my iPad. Yeah, it was sunny today, but I didn't get around to going up here until it's almost sunset, and it's actually a bit, yeah. Happens in Portugal. It gets cold ever. Like you forget in the summer that it even rains here. Yeah, so it's a nasty surprise if there's one type of enemy that blocks the ray, and you could shoot your wand expecting that every other type it could polymorph into won't block it, and you know that polymorph is guaranteed to change the type into one of the 4 other types, and finding out that doesn't change it would be a nasty surprise. Sometimes that level of planning is a life or death situation. You need to the rules need to be clear and explicit enough that you can plan around them, and nasty surprises need to come out of comprehensible random things to feel fair. And which way the designer chose to resolve this edge case doesn't necessarily feel fair. Like that's something you have to consider when figuring out how to resolve these kinds of rare conditions. Like, is it going to feel fair to people that I made this call? I think in this case, it's not terrible. It's not terrible, but I don't think it's the right call. more intuitive, more what people would expect if polymorph happens first and then it's based on that. It feels okay when there's a type that blocks the ray and the ray goes into it and that polymorphs into something else but the ray is still blocked. You're like, oh yeah, it was blocked when it hit it, I guess, makes sense. But when it turns into a kind that blocks and the ray's going through it, you're like, that's sketch. You know, that enemy totally says on it that it's going to block a ray, and I can see a ray going through it. Like that's not on. Even when it's like to your advantage, which it mostly is. Like, yeah. So, I'm thinking about whether to like rewrite a bunch of that to resolve the situation differently. But the thing is, it's messy. Like, it gets messy. Because like I said, you have to predict what the outcomes of polymorphs are going to be. But it's not just that. So what I can do is I can just like make a copy of the game world, like zap the wand, have it go around, see everywhere it's going to hit, and then I know what its full path is going to be, and then I can go back. Like, oh yeah, I predicted it. But that's, in this edge case, that's not actually reliable, because what the path is going to be, if you have a wand with Ruthless Cell, so it goes around lots of the map, Polymorph, so that it's changing types, and there's some types that block ray and some types don't, and Teleport, then what could happen is the wand hits one enemy, teleports it into the path of the ray, then hits it again and turns it into something that blocks the ray, and so the ray ends there, and then anything, and then there's all the space that isn't the path of the ray, so it's like breaking the rule that it only teleports into the path of the ray if there's no other choice, because like since you stopped the ray there, now there's all the space that isn't in the path. And yeah, it's just like there's only that space there because it did teleport into the path of the ray and stop there. And then for anything else that might get teleported along the way, it could go there. So I'd have to it would be okay. It would be okay to just, in that situation, see like some of them go to the path of the ray, and then maybe the ray stops, and then like what the path of the ray is different depending on where they stop. That's fine. But it would feel ideal to me to minimize the number that hit twice. But not like not predetermine the outcome of the polymorphs to minimize it, just to just put the number that would. Yeah, so I have to, for each enemy, determine what it would turn into if it's going to be polymorphed, and then yeah, maybe it's not important. Maybe it's not important to minimize it, but still, it's just like. I don't like it. Yeah, so like there's this slightly complicated code resolution, which is probably what I'm going to end up doing, but I'm going to have to rewrite a bunch of the one logic to actually actually make that work and have the predictions that it has to make to do that accurately, actually be consistent with what happens. The alternatives are to just remove one of those effects. If I just didn't have the upgrade on some enemies that just that type of enemy blocks the ray and others don't, like that, then that wouldn't be a problem. If I didn't have polymorph, but like that would be too much of a loss. If I didn't have teleport, I'd consider losing teleport, but it's not that important, except in the case where the wand also passes through walls and you can teleport the treasure out of the little vault and shortcut getting the key that way. That's cool. So I think that's cool enough that teleport has to stay. Yeah, so it's like that the way the wand effects are coded, like they happen sequentially, and it's just going to be annoying to rewrite that to because another thing that can happen is the wand can destroy walls. So I'm already having to keep track of what walls the wand will destroy to pre-compute where it's going to go. It's all possible. It's just every ability that affects it makes it messier. And maybe there's a more elegant resolution. But yeah, that's just like a specific really edge case, but you have to think about them because they come up. Single post. Obviously, I'm still sometimes working on it. If I just looked at games by the numbers, I should have written that off as a flop years ago. But I think it's a really good piece of work. I think it really the rogue thing of having unidentified wands, but identifying by deduction, seeing their effects rather than just by zapping them once and it's ID'd, and having multiple effects on the same one so you can have it partially identified. That's cool. That's really cool. I see why it's kind of off-putting for a lot of people, because it's a lot of uncertainty. There's a language thing, and because I was when I just started living in Portugal and I was first taking Portuguese classes was when I was working on that originally, and It's like, okay, let's like work in Portuguese, because everyone else in my class is like doing their job places where they're practicing Portuguese in day-to-day life, and I'm not, but I'm my own boss, so I can be. And yeah, I'd always thought about like making up a rune language to have a cryptical game that to figure out what the symbols meant. And there I go. Like I just had a rune language handy that I didn't have to Tolkien up, you know, like, because be honest with you, like, saying that single pass is in Portuguese is kind of a joke. Like, it's not in Portuguese as a Portuguese person speaks it. It's in my really bad Portuguese of the time that Portuguese people did not understand. Because, like, it's just like my fragmented learning. So it's not in a real language, but the way a lot of people reacted to it, like they just like took me at face value, like, oh, it's in a real language that I don't know, so like I'm xenophobic or something, so piss off. Like, yeah, there's several comments that like, oh, if this was just in a made-up rude language, I'd be on board, but like Portuguese, no, like that just feels really bad to me. Like, come on, it's just like, if you don't know the language, then it is just like it's in a fantasy thing. Why would you prefer a fantasy thing than like something that like has real roots? Like, but like they genuinely like, they said it and I believed it. It felt like that they meant it. Would have preferred if it was just made up symbols. It made them uncomfortable that someone else might understand it and then not. Like, yeah, I feel like there's something weird going on there, that like that they're more uncomfortable with the foreign than the alien, or the fantastical. Like, yeah, like when you're massaging someone and you like get the spot and suddenly there's like a tenting up and a resistance. It feels like that. It feels like, oh, I hit a trigger point there, and like there's obviously something there, and like what's happening. And then the thing to do is not to keep pressing harder on that point, but like understand the anatomy and come at it from another angle, and like figure out what it's connected to, and like use it out. Yeah, so I'm not sure artistically how to do that. Like, if there's a way that I could recognize that that's triggering something in people, and like come at it from a different angle so that they can approach it comfortably, and then get over that being triggered by something that shouldn't be triggering. But that's a thing that art can do. Like that, I feel that's one of the roles of art, is to trigger people sensitively, carefully. Yeah, it's still cold. And yeah, there's like in this hideous discussion of are games art? Yeah, of course they can be, but like they're in this tension being pulled different ways. It's like, I mean, all art is in the tension of like, is it going to be a commercial product, or is it going to do that artistic function of like expanding people's minds and their comfort zones and their ways of seeing the world? Like those are often in conflict. But then with games, there's also just like does it function as a program, as a piece of software, like games and all software art, like, and that can, yeah, like if you're painting and like a painting like triggers something, you're like, oh, can I explore this thing that it's triggering, just find a comfortable way of coming at it, then you just paint some more of it, and it doesn't take that long. If you have to write a new piece of software potentially from the ground up to try and explore this concept, like it takes forever. And like also working as a game designer, like not all games work as game designs or have to, but it's nice when they do, like in a balanced, strategic way. So there's 4 different directions all pulling in it. Do I want to make something that's like mind expanding art, or do I want to make something that makes me money? Please give me money. Or I want to make something that, well, if it's computer software, I have to make something that functions as computer software. And that, in my previous, I was talking about like updates, that's an ongoing thing. It's not just one-off making it work. And like game design, which is like the yeah, I care about making games that are actually strategic spaces that have bounded choices that make sense, and that can certainly be in agreement with the mind expanding art side to give ways of thinking about the world, if the ways of thinking about the world are sufficiently logical, which a lot of good ways are, but not all. Yeah, so there's this conflict, and I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's getting dark. Yeah, what I was saying, the language thing is what a lot of people cited as the reason they couldn't get into the game, but it's definitely like a discomfort for people, and I don't think it's the actual fundamental thing that makes the game hard to get into. Like, it's extra discomfort, maybe an unnecessary discomfort, and it's what people are most consciously noticing, so that's what they cite as a reason. But actually the game itself is discomforting in a way. The amount of uncertainty that you have to deal with, and like popular games tend to not have that much randomness. It's, like, often lots and lots and lots of abilities that do like a fixed thing, and like people love memorizing this whole list of effects, and like some of them have a little bit of randomness in them, but like not that amount. But and even the roguelike thing of unidentified items, people like save them up until they can identify them safely. Like having to actually use an unidentified item in a dangerous situation is something people try to avoid. It's like single pouch pushes you into that all the time. Like you have to. You don't find out if something damages an enemy unless you fire it at that enemy, and maybe something bad will happen. And that's the heart of the game, and that's really like deep and important. Like from the art, conceptual, mind expanding side, like we need to be able to act under uncertainty to live life, and it'd be good for a lot of people to learn to be more comfortable doing that. Like I think that's really something that the game has to offer there. But like, yeah, that's uncomfortable. Yeah, so like this is one thing about like, how can I get this concept, this potential bit of growth that the idea has to offer to the world, across whether like change the game to make that more accessible somehow, or am I going to make a new game but exploring the same concept, or what? Okay, it's dark and cold, so I'm going home.